real life. Oh, not even a little bit. All right, it's that time once again. Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday here from Awesemo.com. College football DFS live before lock. I am Ben Raza. That is Matt Kajeski. We are back once again for more games. We cannot get enough college football around these parts. 12-game slate. We're going to try to talk a little this, a little that, get into everything. But of course, I'm going to start where I always do, with our friends at PrizePicks, sponsoring the show today. If you haven't been over there, daily prop-based contests. They want to help you get started. They're offering a great deposit bonus. You don't deal with mass entries. You don't deal with optimizers. You're just picking 2, 3, 4, or 5 players on the board. You're going to judge, are they going over or under their projected scores? If you get, say, 5 out of 5, you're going to get up to 10x your entry fee. They're offering NBA, baseball, WNBA, NFL, college football, anything that you guys want to play, they have over there. Download the app in the App Store or on Google Play. Make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo. You're going to get an instant first match deposit bonus up to $100. I know, Matt, you've been killing it over there. What caught your eye right out of the gate at PrizePicks today?
Oh, man, I take a lot of these early in the week. I'm very disappointed to see my Trace and Potts bet is all the way up to 106.5.
You're moving the lines.
We took that on Thursday at 91.5. That was what I had queued up. But, you know, these move fast. And like my Deer King one is up too. Peyton Thorne is up. Man, I don't know. These are efficient come Saturday morning.
No doubt. And that's one of the many reasons you want to watch your PrizePick videos throughout the week. You've been dropping really good numbers. You're beating those closing lines. I still think there's some on the board. I've been targeting, we did this last night with Malik Cunningham, his rushing yards. I think some of these mobile quarterbacks in competitive games can really be a positive thing. So you got De'Ara King today, 44.5 rushing yards against Michigan State. He looks healthy. He looks ready to go. I think he'll push over that total. So there's a lot on the board there. We will talk about them throughout the games. But what do you think about King in general there?
I like King. I'm happy that he actually rushed in the second game. So I do think that is one to look at. I have been diving in a little bit here. Someone I've been trying to short and failing so far this year has been Javian Hiley for Coastal Carolina. And it's hard for me to say that I love my Chanticleers, but he's projected for 105.5 receiving yards. So an extremely high prop. He's going to get there through efficiency, but the thing is the volume's not there. So if he doesn't have those long catches, Hiley probably comes up short on this prop. So that'd be another one I look at.
Yeah, it's not just going over. I know everyone loves to root for totals, but sometimes you can get under. We will touch on these guys throughout the show, no doubt about it. But let's dive into the games. We've got 12 of them. We start Nebraska and Oklahoma. Oklahoma, a 23-point favorite, 62.5-point total. It looks like a cool matchup on paper. I think this is going to be an absolute beatdown. Let's start with Nebraska. Before our chat, they know what's going on. They want to know who is playing for this Cornhusker team. A lot of injuries on the outside with their wide receivers.
News just came through. Most of them are warming up. That doesn't mean they'll play. But if you're looking at Awesemo.com and the projections, had all of them projected in. And when that happens, they mostly cannibalize each other. We do have the leader, Samori Toure, at 5,600 on DraftKings. I think it's just too expensive for him in this matchup against Oklahoma, who has a very good defense. Oklahoma will be playing without some of their top corners. 2 of their top 3 are injured right now, but I'm still not sure how much they can put up on the board. Like, it hasn't really affected their implied team total. So I'm probably ignoring the Nebraska receivers. And all of this, the problems that we have are kind of exacerbated by the fact that we just don't know who's going to play among the players warming up.
So what does that do to Adrian Martinez? You know, he is mobile. He crossed the 100-yard bonus against Buffalo. But again, that's not exactly Oklahoma's defense, even though they've struggled at times. Where does he fit in the hierarchy of QBs today?
He's a little expensive. There's some other players I like more in his range with better totals, better game environments. Adrian always is live because of the rushing upside. We saw that against Illinois in week 0, where he rips off a 70-yard touchdown and kind of propels his DFS success. But Martinez overall is going to be a middling option in GPPs only.
And nothing in this backfield, correct?
3-man timeshare, complete disaster.
On the other side, we got Spencer Rattler, who he hasn't made a push for the Heisman, but he's still in the conversation, no doubt about it. They've got every weapon imaginable. Where do we begin? I assume this is a team that is firmly in the stack conversation.
Rattler can be stacked for sure. And like you said, he hasn't played poorly. He's still completing 77% of his passes, 8.4 yards per attempt. Those are very efficient numbers. Somewhat mobile. He's 36 yards on the ground this year. He's never going to be Lamar Jackson, but he's not likely to take zeros or negative yards on the ground either, which is positive. There's still no Theo Weiss, but he is stacking options at every price point. And again, we haven't gotten a great look at what Oklahoma is going to do this year. Even in week 1 against Tulane, they were up. I forget the exact score. It was like 37-14, something egregious at halftime, and then they let Tulane back in the game. But even in that contest, they took their foot off the gas, and players like Marvin Mims and Jaden Haselwood didn't play a full complement of snaps, and they for sure didn't in week 2. So if this game is somewhat competitive, I'm not confident it will be. Maybe you see Mims and Haselwood play a little bit more. I'm expecting them to be the top 2 receivers at different price points. So if you're looking for a stud, Mims very much fits the bill. Haselwood's a bit cheaper. And then from there, you even have some punt plays, and like Austin Stogner, the tight end, he's out there most of the time. Mike Woods has been the wide receiver 3, he's a former transfer. And I think even Mario Williams, he hasn't eclipsed more than 45% of the team's routes, but he's just a punt play on a team that has a 42 implied team total.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to go on a little Oklahoma rant, nothing too crazy. Week 1, they're up by 20 plus at halftime. The game ends 40-35 against Tulane. Very disappointing. Then they take it out on a creative school last week, 76-0 against Western Carolina. That is just not taking the foot off the gas. You have said, you like Lincoln Riley, but one of the things he does, sometimes he does kind of pull starters and key contributors a little early. I think that those days are over. I don't want to say permanently. I have a feeling they are really going to lay it on Nebraska, especially if they get out ahead. What about the back?
A lot of coaches do that, especially like Kirby Smart at Georgia and like even Ryan Day at Ohio State. They're trying to prevent transfers.
Yeah, I get building some depth, but you got to cover those numbers, guys. Come on, coaches, just work with me here. We need them to win by 4 touchdowns today. But talk to me about Kennedy Brooks, Eric Gray. How much is it straight 50-50? Is one of these guys primed for more carries?
It might be slightly favored towards Brooks, but it's going to be mostly a 50-50 timeshare. Brooks played really well in that first game, 14 carries, 87 yards. He had 1,000 yards rushing in his first 2 seasons, usurped Trey Sermon before he transferred to Ohio State. So Brooks has a lot of talent. It's unfortunate that Eric Gray transferred here with kind of Brooks uncertain to play, but then Brooks opts back in. Gray's a former Tennessee back. He's also been really efficient, played in a very difficult situation in Tennessee. These two are both like right around 5K. And we talk about this a lot on the shorter slates. We talked about it with Coastal Carolina. You have a team implied for a lot of points. There isn't a clear favorite for backfield touches, but there's still a decent chance that one of these guys puts up a really big score, whether it's through efficiency or multiple touchdowns. For that reason, I have a decent amount of both of these backs in tournaments exclusively because they're going to come in lower owned. There's just other backs that have clear paths to work, but these players have as much upside as them.
No doubt. Just a team to clearly target. We're not breaking any news there. Oklahoma's quite good. Let's go to your boys on the slate. Coastal, they made it. 2-touchdown favorite at Buffalo. Kind of a weird game. 57.5 point total. Obviously, Coastal is going to be the side that we're probably going to look at a little stronger. You've got Grayson McCall. You mentioned the backfield. You've got Reese White, Shimani Jones. Then on the outside, likely the tight end and Javion Hiley, who you look to possibly short on PrizePicks. But where do you see yourself going overall with this Coastal Carolina team?
They're priced pretty efficiently now, except for the runners. I think Reese White should not be 3K more than Shamari Jones. They have almost identical opportunity, but Reese White's been scoring the touchdowns. So Shamari's a potential punt play down at 4,400 you can look at. The issue is they've been starting to mix in Braden Bennett as a running back 3. So instead of dealing with a 2-man committee, it's upwards of 3 in certain spots. And now they've been pretty much favored in these games. They've handled Kansas and the Citadel. I'm not sure if that's a product of game script and them being ahead by a lot, or if they actually want to get Bennett active. So I don't have a ton of the backfield. McCall's been extremely efficient. He's averaging 253 passing yards on just 20 attempts, just absolutely mind-bending numbers. But competition has been very poor. He does have 40 yards on the ground, and that's typically a little worse than what we saw to McCall. They just haven't needed to use him in that capacity. The issue here is I'm not sure Buffalo's a step up in competition. They've been a very weak team to start the year. Most of their team transferred out. They lost their head coach. And does Coastal need to use McCall in that capacity? I don't really think they do. And similar to the previous games, I think if you're playing guys like Hiley or Likely even though he's a bit cheaper, I think you're banking on efficiency, which I don't think can be guaranteed if Coastal takes their foot off the gas.
No doubt. Buffalo's not a great team. Nebraska handled them pretty easily. They do run a lot of plays and they like to pass the ball, but what does that mean for their offense? Is this quarterback in Van Treese even playable at 56?
I don't think so. He's not mobile whatsoever. So whatever these non-mobile quarterbacks do to win tournaments, they have to make up for the negative sack yardage through the air. So you likely need like a 300-yard bonus or something like that. Van Treese is super cheap, but at the same time, I'm not sure he can overcome that. He's only averaging 227 passing yards on 35 attempts per game. There's just better options in this price range. That Buffalo's been a really hard team to project. So they've been getting crushed in games. With that, they've been running a lot of plays per game, 83, but that's a small sample size. They've been passing 60% of the time, but their offensive coordinator comes over from James Madison, and that program was very run heavy and very slow. So I don't think they're actually playing the way they want to, making this Buffalo team pretty risky overall. Like Chan Williams projects pretty well as the number one receiver. He's a former Bowling Green transfer. That's strictly off like PPR value. But if you adjust this highly volatile pass rate right now, he's somebody I think that could maybe be a little bit worse than the projection suggests. So I'm kind of approaching this Buffalo offense cautiously, even though some of them project well. Kevin Marks, if you flip the pass rate and go back kind of towards what they did last year, he'll project really well. It's just a matter of, I'm not sure I want to get a lot of these guys anyway as huge underdogs against a Coastal team that kind of stymies opposing play volume.
Yeah, Coastal's got a solid defense. Marks, I get it, in GPPs and whatnot, reasonable price tag, but not a great team to target.
Like,
all right.
Marks is going to project well. He'll project better than like Kennedy Brooks or Eric Gray, or at least close. But I think I would rather just take shots in tournaments on like Brooks and Gray and the players that have multi-touchdown upside. Marks, with his 22 implied team total, like there's a pretty good chance he doesn't get in the end zone at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real scenario where Buffalo struggles to even get to that team total. So definitely want to keep that in mind. Interesting game here. Michigan State going to Miami, 6.5-point favorite for the Canes, 57-point total. Michigan State's look good. Peyton Thorne, we've both been pretty impressed by him. He's got a little rushing. Kenneth Walker, the transfer from Wake, here and there. It's not an explosive team, though. They've got two big-time receivers on the outside. What do you make of Michigan State? Can they hang in the game, and are they DFS viable?
Yeah, Thorne's been awesome, and Russo got hurt. So whatever job concerns you had with Thorne, they're gone. He's not going to get taken out of the game at this point unless he completely torpedoes. He's been extremely efficient. And running, he's been a decent dual threat too, like you mentioned, only 7K. This is quietly a pretty good game environment, even though the total's not great. I think a lot of that comes down to competition for these teams. Like Michigan State played Northwestern and Youngstown State. Miami played Alabama and App State. So the total is a little depressed. I actually bet the over in the game. But you have two teams that have been fairly up-tempo and pass-heavy. Michigan State had a 52% pass rate last year. Miami is above average in pass rate too. If these teams' defenses just aren't quite as good as you might think, the overall way these offenses play could lend itself to play volume and production for the skill position players. I like Thorne as a contrarian quarterback to stack because of the mobility, and he's super easy to stack. The target distribution for Michigan State is so narrow. Jaden Reed and Jalen Naylor are the only players that get targets in this offense. And their prices are drastically different because Jaden Reed has had the explosive plays, even though Naylor actually has more targets. So I like double stacking these guys in stacks of the game in big tournaments. Again, big tournaments, I want to preface with that. They're not really low volume plays. Like I think Naylor's a good cash play, but I wouldn't play Jaden Reed in cash. Overall, I think this game is a little sneaky, and I like the Thorne stacks with Naylor and Reed.
Yeah, Ricky White, obviously still not there. Jalen Naylor, 6,800 on FanDuel. Don't mind that target. It is very condensed, and I do think they'll have some success. I don't know if I'd go as far. Slim is asking about the money line there. It is a tough spot. I think it's a big step up because I don't think Northwestern's any good. And certainly I respect De'Ara King and what they're doing on the other side. Charleston Rambo, really good FanDuel price as well, in my opinion. What do you make of Miami, and how do you think they attack today?
Yeah, and last thing with Michigan State, like Kenneth Walker is a great play. I don't want to gloss over him. He doesn't really catch the ball, but he's going to get a lot of carries. So Walker is appropriately priced. For Miami, like you mentioned earlier, De'Ara King, it was really nice to see him rush. He had 79 yards in week 2 against App State. And I even if he's a little less efficient, I'm just happy that he's doing it. It makes me more comfortable playing him because his mobility is such a key to his overall DFS success. And like we mentioned at the top, this Miami team was 33rd in plays per game last year, 50th in pass rate. They're an up-tempo, pass-heavy team under Rhett Lashley, the former SMU offensive coordinator. And D'Eriq King should be more efficient moving forward because that Alabama game is really just stymieing any sort of efficiency stats he had. He projects fairly well for me, a lot of it coming down to rushing ability. He's in the same price range as like Peyton Thorne, Keaton Slovis. I think he's a pretty good value and somebody that you could look to in tournaments. The question is, who do you stack him with? And they've kind of been all over the place. Mike Harley got banged up in week 1, so his stats are a little bit depressed. He's their slot receiver. That makes Charleston and Rambo kind of the number one, in my opinion. They've been targeted at also this almost the same rate when on the field. But Rambo just used a little more downfield. I think there's a little bit more explosiveness to his game, chance for bigger plays. He'd probably be who I looked at. But I honestly don't know if you need to stack King because he's pretty mobile.
What does that do to Cameron Harris in the backfield? I assume you're probably not going to want him with King. That might be a little awkward, but can you just isolate Miami and say maybe they keep it on the ground with Harris?
Yes, I thought about this a lot. I don't have any King and Harris together. I think in King's ceiling, he doesn't cede a lot of the rushing, like touchdowns and rushing work to Cameron Harris. The problem is they lost now both their backups. Like Donald Chaney hasn't played. They lost Jalen Knighton. So Cameron Harris is really the only back. They listed Cody Brown as their backup. He hasn't played at all this year. And their beat reporters are suggesting that Cameron Harris is going to get a larger workload. I kind of split the difference with this because they've never given Cameron Harris a full workload out of the backfield, but he does project very well at 5,400. He's in play for cash, I think.
Okay. I mean, I get it. I do think he's solidified the volume. And again, I kind of lean Miami, I think will look better than people think. Michigan State is a team a lot of people are high on, and I get it. They've looked good to start the season, but this is a whole different test. Not a great total. You lean the over, so I like that. There's another game where I know you lean over because we talked about it on Betting You, which if you have not checked out our podcast, every Wednesday episode drops. We talk betting, break down, get some good lines there before they move. No reason not to do that. So we've got West Virginia. We've got Virginia Tech coming into Morgantown. West Virginia 2-point favorite. The total's around 49.5, pretty low. Let's start with the Hokies. Big win against North Carolina to start the season. Burmeister looked actually pretty good, but where does he fall on a 12-game slate?
Virginia Tech's another tough team project. They came out in week 1 and ran with a ton of tempo, really fast team. Their pass rate's never going to be super high. Last year, it wasn't with Hendon Hooker. This year, it's not going to be with Burmeister. He's a dual threat, so they're going to keep it on the ground a little bit more. He's been modestly efficient, but I just don't know if they're going to play with as much tempo as they did in week 1. It was really weird to see them fall back to their old ways in week 2. Burmeister got banged up in the game, but he appears healthy. At 6,800, I think he's a fine play. I think he's a little worse than Thorne, a little worse than Slovis, a little worse than D'Eriq King we just talked about. But I have a little bit of him in the player pool. He's a little bit easier to stack now. They lost their tight end, James Mitchell. So Trey Turner, Tavian Robinson are going to be the two guys handling most of the targets. Neither are particularly expensive. And when you look at West Virginia, they have a very weak defense. And they're extremely pass heavy, extremely up tempo, which generally leads to more play volume for opposing teams. I personally like the over. It's still not going to be extremely high, but I think this is a game you want to pick and choose pieces from. Again, I think Burmeister and some of those receivers are viable in big GPPs.
What about Blackshear? He can catch the ball a little. He was much more active in the North Carolina game with the receiver. I don't know exactly what they did last week against. I think it was Middle Tennessee State.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like they're a fine team, but nothing special. Where does he fall? He's certainly more priced up. I believe he was in the 3K range to open the season.
Yeah, that was an easy play. And like in tournaments and stacks. But at 5,400, he's the same price as Cameron Harris. Like he's more expensive than Travion Henderson, than Eric Gray, than Will Shipley. I think there's other backs with more upside.
On the other side, is one of those backs, Letty Brown, because it feels like if West Virginia is going to win this game, he's got to be very, very active. Where does he fall? He's 6,900 on DraftKings, 10K on FanDuel, though.
FanDuel, man, they've been doing a pretty good job with pricing until today, I think. But Letty Brown, he's one of the true bell cows on the slate, and we don't have a lot of them on DraftKings. So I think he does deserve some consideration. He should definitely be in your tournament pool. He's just one of the only backs that has this workload. He didn't cede a single touch to another back in week 1. And of course, they played Long Island in week 2. So it's hard to really gather any information for that game. Letty, I think, might be a little bit underpriced, but I think all the backs towards the top of the slate outside of Reese White are pretty underpriced.
Anything for the pass catchers? I know Dogie or whatever his name is. He can't rush the ball. He's up to negative 28 on the year, but he's got a lot of receivers, a lot of pass catchers. It's just hard. How do you sort through what these guys, because all of them look like they could pop off at any moment?
Yeah, a lot of issues with these non-mobile quarterbacks. Again, like how does he overcome the negative rushing yards? And he's been consistently in the negatives through his career. He's hard to stack, in my opinion. Even though I like the over in the game, can you play this stack over like Alabama stacks or even some cheaper guys in those games like your DR Kings, like your Slovises? I don't really think you can. So it kind of takes the receivers out of play for me too. They use 4 of them. The pecking order is not exactly clear. Like Winston Wright led the team last year. Sam James led in 2019 before he got benched. Bryce Ford Wheaton is leading the team in targets, but he only has 97 yards. The receivers are kind of just like throwing darts.
No doubt. Tough game. Not betting it. May jump on the over with you, but I don't have a side. If I had to, I'd take West Virginia, but I hope Virginia Tech wins. Next game is one of the more fascinating on the slate. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about Cincinnati, who, they're a dark horse, I think, to get in the mix. They're 3.5-point favorite going to Indiana. They need to look good. There's no doubt about it. Desmond Ridder, he's got experience. He's good. He's mobile. He could do what he wants. Not a crazy dual threat, but they've got weapons all across the board here. So talk to me about them. We haven't seen them really be pushed just yet. Do you think they get pushed today? And what does that do for, target share and just how they really run this offense?
I think they get pushed. You should see more than the 23.5 attempts that Ritter's averaging per game. He's still been extremely efficient on them. He's very mobile. He had 12 touchdowns on the ground last year. So he's somebody you should consider just for that reason alone. But in this price range, I do think there's better players. You only need to pay a little bit more to get up to some guys like Bryce Young or Rattler, as we'll get to later in the show. So Ritter's not my favorite play, but viable in GPPs. He's extremely hard to stack. They use multiple receivers here. Alec Pierce should lead the group. But again, they're already a run-heavy offense, and you're dealing with a rotation. So how much Pierce do you really want? I think in tournaments, he's fine, but he's tough to get to, in my opinion. I think the favorite player in this game is Jerome Ford, 7K. He's taken over the Jared Dokes role basically completely. He's averaging 16.5 opportunities per game, over 100 yards on the ground alone, 3 targets in the opener, which suggests he should be playing in pass game situations. They're slight favorites here against Indiana. So I think Jerome Ford, is the top play for the Bearcats.
You have Ford ahead of guys like Letty Brown and Kenneth Walker today?
No, but he's viable in tournaments. Like he's not that much far behind.
Fair enough. Indiana, it's been a tricky season to begin. Iowa crushed them. Then Iowa not crushed Iowa State. Maybe Iowa's just good. We're going to find out today. Penix still working back a little bit. The rushing has not been there at all. So where does that leave them? You have a guy like Freifogel on the outside. Certainly can get involved. Carr in the backfield is taking a ton of carries each week. But what do we make of Cincinnati, who is a very, very good team?
Yeah, it's tough. Cincinnati's very strong on the defensive line. Myjai Sanders is there. The weakness of Indiana has been their offensive line. They just can't pass protect. It's the issue they had last year, too. Part of the reason why Penix got hurt, they were giving up pressures on nearly 40% of his dropbacks. And for a guy that was labeled a dual threat, being so non-mobile is really interesting to see. But again, coming off the ACL tear, it's not like his mobility increased. So if they're generating a lot of pressure, that's going to be hard on Penix. Not to mention they have 2 all-conference corners coming back to the team for Cincinnati. It's going to be hard on them here. It is a huge step up in competition for Cincinnati. I don't love Penix because he can't run. And if you're stacking him, like what has to happen in this game environment for it to win a GPP? I think you would just need like a vintage Ty Freifogel performance. And he has been seeing the targets, just the efficiency is not there from last year. He's at 33% target share. His price has fallen because they haven't been able to get it done. But I think he's pretty clearly the number one option. You have DJ Matthews in the slot. Miles Marshall begins splitting a little bit with Javon Swinton. This isn't a game I particularly love.
Tough game. I do kind of like Freifogel over on PrizePicks, 67.5. I think he can push over that. I expect him to be busy, particularly if Cincinnati gets ahead. They have no choice. He should have a lot of targets today.
Yeah, Indiana's pass rate last year, 27%. Their coaching staff is intact. 33% target share on the 27th highest pass rate in the country. Yeah, it's a good bet.
It's going to be an interesting game. We're going to find out. I really like Cincinnati in life. I respect their coach a ton. You got to look good in games like this if you're going to try to become relevant. on the national, the national stage, we'll say. All right. I didn't even know this next game was on the slate. I told you right before the show.
What?
I like this game. I bet this game. We're going to get to it. We've got Minnesota. We've got Colorado going into Boulder. Minnesota, of course, we saw them early in the season against Ohio State. We know what they want to do. They want to run Ibrahim 30 plus times. The problem with that, he's out for the season. So my first question is now Trey Potts that guy? And how does he fall in these running back ranks?
He's absolutely that guy. Surprise to me, but it's very good for DFS. The dude came in and had 34 carries in his first game as the starter. They are just hell-bent on using one running back in this role. Great for DFS. Like Ibrahim is pushing 9K on slates. Now you get Trey Potts at 7,300. He's the highest projected overall running back just based on raw attempts. He is not that much far ahead of some other guys, and it's because the total in this game is so low. So you just have less likelihood for multi-touchdown games. But Potts, he is the most consistent value out of any player.
What is left on the outside? I guess the first question should be, is Autman Bell ever going to play? Is he close to returning? And if he does, is he relevant?
He's been practicing. No idea if he's going to play. PJ Fleck's not good with injury information, so you probably won't know even if he warms up. For that reason, I'm not going to play Autman Bell. There's just too many other plays to take that risk on a run-heavy team in Minnesota that has an extremely low total. Behind him, Dylan Wright and Daniel Jackson have been the wide receiver 1 and 2, not playing them for the same reasons. Low total, run heavy environments. They're really also not efficient through the air.
Just Potts or pass?
Yes.
Okay. On the other side, and I bet Colorado in this game -2.5. I think they handled them at home.
Me too.
They looked, yeah, come on board. They looked good against A&M. Sorry, our man behind the glass, Tyler, friend of the show, of course. It's all right. You guys got the win. Talk to me about Brendan Lewis, though. He's another guy. He's got some upside. Chat's kind of wondering like him or Penix. To me, Lewis still has the dual threat ability, so I would go there. But where does he fall in the QB ranks at 5,500?
100% with you. Complete punt plays like below 6K, he's the guy you want to target based purely on his rushing upside. He's been pretty bad as a passer, but they played Northern Colorado in their first game, and they played a stingy opponent in Texas A&M. Minnesota is falling almost, I don't know, the midpoint between those two teams. So against a wildly average defense, which has been very bad against opposing runners, I think Lewis does have some upside here. If you're just purely punting off the position, I think he's fine. You don't have to stack him because he's such a good dual threat. It's not a preferred play, but it's viable.
Yeah, that's the one problem. I think you might have to run him alone because I have no idea how you decipher this wide receiver core. Chenault's suspended, and the rest of these guys, it's no one emerging just yet. So even in the backfield, Broussard and Fontenot, it's tough. Do you see anything else outside Lewis for this team?
If you stack him, it's probably with Dimitri Stanley, but I don't want to do that. The backfield is going to be a split. Broussard is probably the 1A, like maybe 60 to 65% of the carries to Fontenot is like 30 to 35, but it's going to be a split. Broussard's not going to have the role he had last year. Fontenot was out for the year last year. He's the leading rusher from 2019. So I think everybody expected this to be a timeshare. Broussard's just not the 3-down back he was a season ago.
No doubt. All right. 6 down, 6 to go. We are doing good. Chat, let's pump up these likes over 100, though. Let's keep that moving for the second half of the show. Should be easy game. Purdue at Notre Dame.
Keyshawn King's out for Virginia Tech. So that backfield's narrower. It should be just Holston and Raheem Blackshear now. I think that makes Blackshear a slightly better play.
Okay. The Hokies. Anyway, Purdue going to Notre Dame. You guys almost lost to Toledo.
Don't remind me. I bet the game.
Not good. 7.5 point favorite for the Irish. 58 point total. Apparently they weren't allowed to bring their big drum. You guys doing all sorts of shenanigans in South Bend. But let's talk about Purdue. I don't know. They're not a great team. What do we make of the Boilermakers? They do run a lot of plays, though. So does this make it an environment where maybe this is a sneaky DFS game?
For sure. Bad defenses on both sides. I mean, I'm presuming that for Purdue, they haven't played anybody yet. So I'm presuming a poor defense. We will see. They actually have some pretty good production coming off the edge in Karlaftis, so potentially giving Notre Dame, which has a completely redone offensive line, some issues there. But like you mentioned, Purdue, super pass heavy. They're fairly on pace for just like the league average in tempo, but against a bad Notre Dame defense, that's fine. Jack Plummer has been pretty good to start the year. He's not very mobile. It's one of these things, again, where if Notre Dame sacks him a couple times, how does he overcome the negative rushing yards on the ground? And he's 7,900, unlike some of the other guys we talked about. So he's going to need multiple touchdowns, a 300-yard game to get in the optimal. He possibly can do it. And I like the target distribution. If you play him, I think you got to lock in David Bell, their alpha receiver. Again, they haven't played anybody, so his target share is depressed, just 25%. He's going to see over 30% target share in competitive games. Nobody's going to play him because of his price and the other available options. So a contrarian stack to maybe look at, but not one that I particularly love because of the negative rushing yards.
No doubt. David Bell is fantastic. Even when Rondell Moore, they will go to him early and often in a game like this. Horvath is hurt. Where does that leave King Doru or Downing in the backfield? Are these guys playable, or do you stick maybe on the outside?
50-50 timeshare between Doru and Downing, I'm presuming. That's what we saw when Horvath went down. Neither back really separates themselves from size, efficiency, anything like that. So I think it's going to be a 50-50 split. They're both cheap. So if this game shoots over the total or something and there's a multi-touchdown game, you want to play them in some GPPs, I think. But I would rather get to some of the backs that are on teams that are larger favorites, like the Oklahoma backs, the Ohio State backs, and we'll talk about them in a little bit.
Where does Kyron Williams fall? We've talked about a lot of backs so far. Like, if you have a pecking order in cash, is he above guys like Potts and Walker? Or is he in the Letty Brown conversation? How do you order all these running backs today?
In that price range, if you can only play one, Potts is your guy. Kyron's 2.
Okay, fair enough.
He's just such a special pass catcher. Like his target share is really high, and he has been ceding some work to Chris Tyree, but it hasn't really mattered. They're giving them both a lot of work. And a lot of Kyron's is coming in the pass game. And this is DraftKings specific. He's a little expensive for me on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, I think he's a fine play. I would not play him in cash over Potts.
Anything on the outside? Mayer is absolutely fantastic, but his price has really come up. Him, Austin, dare I say Cone? I'm not going to say Cone. You can't play him, can you?
No, and they started using like Tyler Buckner on gadget plays, which is great for the offense. Like he's a super dynamic player. He gives you a lot of mobility that Cone doesn't offer. But if he's taking away, and he was out there for like a decent amount of snaps, like it definitely wasn't an insignificant number. I think that hurts Cone's bottom line. He's been averaging 300 passing yards. The best thing you could say about Cone, I think, is their defense is so bad that they've just been having to score. But at the same time, can he live with that efficiency? Cone has negative rushing yards, so he's another player that has to overcome those sacks. The team is really hard to stack with Mayer being expensive now. Davis is actually running the most routes, but he's running wind sprints out there. The guy never gets targeted. Kevin Austin's a middling play. They're a hard team to stack. I like the game environment, but it's probably going to be Kyron and then like David Bell.
Yeah, I think this is a good kind of one-off type game. If you've got some salary, take the alphas on both teams or either team, depending on the environment. I didn't bet it. I won't bet it. I have no idea what's going to happen here. Kind of like the next game, except I do know what's going to happen here. I'm still not going to bet it. Georgia Tech will be dismantled. They're going into Death Valley to take on Clemson. 52.5 point total. So it's not a great game environment. I have to find a team because each week we need to name the Bowling Green irrelevant team of the week. Is it Georgia Tech?
They're only implied for 12 points, probably. They lost to Northern Illinois in their opener. Sneaky team at Northern Illinois. They brought Wyoming within a score. So,
and what happened? Wyoming won because you don't mess around with the Cowboys.
Ben and I got in a fight on betting you about the Wyoming Ball State game, but that's neither here nor there. Georgia Tech, they benched their 4-star Jeff Sims for Jordan Yates, who can't run, so he's not somebody you want to look at. They also put their 4-star running back, Jahmyr Gibbs, in a timeshare with Jordan Mason. You can't target that in a game with 12 points implied for Georgia Tech. Northwestern transfer Kyrick McGowan's their leading receiver, but how many points are we expecting them to score? I think you just X out Georgia Tech.
On the other side, Ugualalele, 8,800, 10K. I mean, it's a luxury at best. How much does he even play? Is it necessary to pay up in that capacity?
No, he's not your preferred pay up option. Basically, all the other pay up options project better than him, but he has a ceiling because of their opponent. And we've seen this multiple times. Even if Georgia Tech can keep it like within 2 or 3 possessions, I think Uiagalelei plays more. He hasn't been good to start the year. So I think they'll want to get him some of these easier games under his belt as they still push for the college football playoff.
We just haven't seen Clemson in any sort of equilibrium. Week 1, they played Georgia. Absolutely brutal matchup. Nothing from the backfield. 3 guys with 4 attempts. Then they play South Carolina State. That's the equivalent of the opposite of Georgia. Just everyone got carries. Clearly, they're gearing down in a game like that. So what do you think volume-wise for someone like Shipley today? Is he going to able to get double-digit carries? And then at 53 and 6,100, where does that put him?
The over-under for carries probably like 9.5 for Shipley. Apparently, Lynn J. Dixon's in the doghouse. That's what a lot of beat reporters are saying. They listed him as the second running back, and that was because they put Shipley and Kobe Pace as co-starters. So I don't know. Lynn J. kind of looks like he might be getting phased out. Shipley's their 5-star recruit. I think he will take on more work as the season goes on. I will be playing a little bit of Shipley in GPPs because of the massive team total, but it's not something you feel good about.
Anything on the outside? Clearly, they've got talent. They've got Nada, they've got Ross. Are any of them going to emerge in a game like this to garner massive target share?
You need to get it with efficiency. Nada, Ross, I think are fine plays. Ladson as well. EJ Williams is playing with like a broken thumb. I don't know how he's doing it. He's supposed to have surgery on it after the year. I wouldn't play him, but they're GPP plays based on team total. Risky because Clemson will bench their starters if they get a lead, like a good lead when we're talking.
Yeah, and this is, it's a 4-touchdown spread. I believe that's the biggest out there today for this slate. So I get it. Could be tough. I don't see a ton in a low environment, because what are the chances that Georgia Tech really plays ball where Clemson's pushed in any conceivable way? I'd say that's pretty doubtful.
I agree. I have shots from Clemson, but they're mostly one-offs.
Not Aju, my man.
No, he still doesn't play, Ben.
No, he doesn't, but that's all right. All right, one of the bigger games on the slate, maybe the biggest game of the week. Bama, 14.5-point favorites. They go into the Swamp to take on Florida. 60-point total. Bama's been absolutely fantastic. You talked about on Betting You. Bryce Young, not only has he been magnificent, against pressure, he's even better. So this guy is just rolling right now. He hasn't played on the road, so we're going to find out a little more about him here. But where does he fall? One of the premier options at QB, but can you pay that opportunity cost?
I think he's probably the best player in the top range of pricing at quarterback to play. It comes down to he's a little bit cheaper on a tight salary, and then he has like dual threat ability that we haven't seen yet. So it's really hard to project him. He has great efficiency, like his passing stats are fine. He easily projects for north of 300 yards, but the guy's recruited as a dual threat. He just hasn't used his legs whatsoever, which is really interesting because he's been under pressure a ton, but he's just been fearless in the pocket. He's completed 75% of his passes while pressured, 286 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, just not scrambling. And it's been fine for Alabama. They've been getting it done with him completing passes while pressured. If he starts using his legs, like the dude has an enormous ceiling. So I like Young quite a bit. He's also really easy to stack with. You have Jamison Williams and John Mechie as the 2 alpha receivers in this offense. Narrow target distribution between the two. Their third receiver is going to be a rotation between Slade Bolden and JoJo Early, and sometimes they'll use 2 tight ends in the field. So I wouldn't get anywhere beyond Jamison Williams and Mechie outside of huge tournaments. And I think those guys are pretty easy to stack given their prices.
Where does that leave Robinson in the backfield?
He's in a 4-man committee. It reminds me of like old Alabama where you had like Damian Harris, Josh Jacobs, and there was another NFL back in that backfield. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but none of them had that bell cow workload. The Najee Harris role at Alabama is kind of a come and go thing depending on who's there. I think it's going to be a timeshare with Robinson leading a group that's going to have upwards of 4 guys carrying the ball.
On the other side, Florida has gone with a 2 QB system to start the year. Both of them have extreme upside on the ground. I'm not sure what either of them, though, have through the air. So I guess the first question is, can you play any of the Florida receivers given this quarterback situation?
I would not. Not only is there uncertainty at quarterback, but they run a nasty rotation. None of them play a lot more than 50% of the snaps. You have Justin Shorter running a route on 58% of dropbacks, which is basically pacing the team. That's not great. And then they're going to be extremely hard to stack with because you don't know which quarterback's going to be out there. Emory Jones has played poorly outside of his rushing. Anthony Richardson, conversely, has just been absurdly efficient, like the most efficient quarterback in the country. The yards per attempt for this guy is ridiculous, and it's coming on just a few attempts, so it's certainly going to negatively regress. But this is easily the most difficult game Florida's played this year. They beat FAU and USF. I think they struggle.
Do you worry at all about Richardson's running upside with a hamstring? I mean, it looks like he's good to go, but without that, where does that leave him? Or are these guys, Can you really do that? Because again, you're cannibalizing each other with Emory Jones. Is anything from Florida viable, just given that every position looks somewhat crowded?
I don't think so. I don't think you want to play any of these guys. As far as Richardson, I think he's fine. He practiced on like Monday. So like this is a dude that's been practicing all week.
In the game, I know a very public and popular side is Bama first half. I get it. Bama, even for the full game. What do you expect for the game in terms of the number at 14.5?
I bet Bama.
All right, there you go. I don't know how you bet Florida. I'll probably jump on Bama as well. They're just a step above right now. And I don't think these quarterbacks are going to be able to do much on the ground. Bama will be ready. Looks like a lot of the guys banged up on Bama's defense too are going to be good to go. So that's even worse for them.
Thank goodness Will Anderson.
Yeah, Will Anderson
almost had a heart attack.
That guy's unbelievable. All right, this is good. We're making good time. We'll try to get some extra games in at the end, answer some questions. You guys know how we do it. I don't know if Matt will survive this next game, though, because we got USC on the slate, 7.5-point favorite at Washington State. USC has gone to the depths. Their coach has been fired. They lost to Stanford. That's very, very bad. But they do have Keaton Slovis, who I love. The question is, do you love him today? 7,200. The guy can absolutely sling it. What do you make of him?
Yeah, Ben's taking shots at my betting record. I ran the numbers last year just to find out which teams I lost the most money on. Number 1, Pittsburgh. Number 2, USC. Slovis is great in his price range. I think it's him or De'Aaron King for cash if you're playing one of the mid-price guys. Slovis is in a better game environment overall based on like Vegas totals. They have a pretty easy matchup against Washington State, whose defense is almost non-existent. USC runs a favorable offense for these kind of situations. Last year, they were 19th in pass rate. They were 4th in pass rate, 19th in plays per game. So really fast, really up tempo. They've struggled a ton in the red zone over the last 2 seasons. Last year, they converted just an egregious 62% of their red zone attempts into touchdowns. For reference, the league average is around 72%. So like well below average. And the same has been true this year. 4 touchdowns on 9 red zone attempts. That should positively regress. It's kind of concerning to me that it's been over a year and it hasn't. But Slovis, that should bode well for him and his touchdown ability. You have stacking options at all price points. Drake London has a 34% target share. You want to get him in there. Taj Washington, the Memphis transfers, also made a ton of targets or seen a ton of targets as well, 14 of them. And USC was a little weird in week 1. I don't know why they did this, but they played mostly 12 personnel, which is something that I've really never seen them do under Graham Harrell. And in week 2, they moved away from that. And they brought in Gary Bryant for 62% of the routes. So Bryant is probably your pure punt play. I don't foresee USC using 2 tight ends a lot. Those guys are all at different price points. So you can double stack Slovis any which way you want, depending on who else is in your lineup.
Yeah, certainly if you go to Slovis, you're going to need to stack it up because he slings it. That's how he's going to have to get there. Anything in the backfield, they have 2 backs that garner a lot of usage.
Yeah, there's only 2 of them. So Bave Malapei, Keontae Ingram, the Texas transfer. Malapei has been more efficient than Keontae Ingram, who's been horribly inefficient during his entire career. But it's a 50-50 timeshare. Neither's expensive. And Malapei is 4,700. I think he's kind of like an arbitrage Kennedy Brooks or Eric Gray. It's an offense that has a really high total overall and a really good game environment. But everyone wants to play Slovis and the pass catchers. They run a lot in the red zone. It was a headache last year playing all these USC stacks and then just seeing them slam Malapei into the back of the offensive line 3 times and kick a field goal, but maybe punches a couple of those in. So I do have some Malapei in tournaments.
Last question from USC. Kyle Ford at the basic min, worth a punt?
No, he's not playing. Or at least he's not playing worthwhile snaps.
On the other side, I don't know what to make of this Washington State team. You've got Delora at QB. Orgy's one of the few guys who is a kind of true dual threat out of the backfield, can really catch the ball when they give him opportunities. But at the same time, it's not Mike Leach there. So how does that change things? And what kind of attack does Washington State run at this point?
Yeah, their offense isn't too different from like Mike Leach. It's this run and shoot. Rolovich is their signal caller. And last year they were 7th in pass rate. And the reason they couldn't run as many plays per game is just inefficiency. They couldn't keep drives together. Delora, like you mentioned, is mobile, which is fantastic. And he's going to throw the ball a ton. People are going to be playing Slovis and you have Delora, who's more expensive. He should come in significantly less owned. I think he doesn't have as much upside, but he's a very good contrarian play in the same game environment. And you're going to get direct leverage if you play Delora. He has easy stacking options. They're pretty much running 4 wide receivers every single play. So Jason Stribling leads the team in targets. Travell Harris and Calvin Jackson are the 2 like known commodities among receivers, all at different price points. And none of them are very expensive. Like you could get Stribling 4,200, super cheap stack, Jackson 4,900. If you stack both of them and you use Delora, like you can just load up on studs at other positions. I think this could be a situation where maybe you play like an expensive stack, like an Alabama stack, and then use this as your secondary option with a run back of like Taj Washington, not using a ton of money on the secondary stack.
I haven't looked at this personally, but we did have a question from chat. Are you nervous about the weather in Pullman?
No.
Okay, there you go. No, look at that.
Unless it's a hurricane, no.
The old hurricane going up to Washington State seems doubtful.
Hurricanes or blizzards, otherwise I don't care.
Yeah, that's fair. This game does seem to have some potential. The thing I like about it, and you mentioned this a couple of times, you have options at every price point. So that is nice. You're not funneled to just top tier or punts. You can get a little. So if you're going with one-offs, you should have someone in this game that could be useful, and maybe you stack it up.
And one side is going to be significantly more popular.
Do you think that's for good reason, though?
Yes, but
okay.
It's worth taking shots on the Washington State side.
I agree. I agree with both of those. Who's going to be the next coach out there?
Franklin from Penn State.
After the whiteout fails today, he just leaves. That's a shame. It's a damn shame. All right, moving on. Florida State, Wake Forest. I don't think Florida State's any good because they're not, but I think this game actually could be very, very useful for this slate. I don't know what to make of Florida State, an embarrassing loss last out. What's the status of this quarterback situation with Milton and the absolute, basically pure runner in Jordan Travis?
Milton starting. No idea what kind of shape he's in. He played last week, but didn't perform very well against FCS competition. He did run a little bit, which was kind of shocking. I'm not sure how mobile he is at this point in his career, how efficient he's going to be. He's a complete unknown. And this is a good game total, solid game environment. The spread is somewhat close. It's moving in Florida State's direction. If you want to take a stab on Milton, I think he's fine. It's just, I have no idea what he's going to give us.
Where do you think his prime targets would be? Would it be the Kansas transfer? Would it be someone else? How do you break down the Florida State wide receivers? Because I don't think Milton's going to be nearly as effective on the ground, just given what he's been through.
Oh, he's certainly not more effective than Travis. Travis is like a pure running back.
Exactly.
There. Parchment's the leader among the receivers, 9 targets. Again, these are all depressed because Travis started a full game. They'll certainly pass more with Milton. And outside of that, it's kind of tough to predict. Cameron McDonald's been running the second most routes. They have Keyshawn Helton, Malik McClain, Darian Williamson. Ontario Wilson is some guy who should be returning soon. Outside of Parchment, I think it's a rotation. So he's cheap enough where I would probably just isolate him.
What about Corbin?
He's going to be in a timeshare with Trayshawn Ward and Lawrence Tuafali. He's tough. I just think at 6,800, why wouldn't you pay 100 more for Letty, like 300 more for Kyron, 400 more for Potts?
There is a massive opportunity cost at running back today. I feel maybe you would disagree. To me, running back seems like the deepest position on this slate.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's players available at most price points where you don't need to get too off the board.
On the other side, this Wake Forest team, they like to play fast. They like to throw the ball. Hartman, 7,800 on DraftKings, 8,900 on FanDuel. I don't mind that. Where does he fall within these quarterbacks today?
Wake Forest really sensitive to game script. They're not afraid to pound the ball when they're ahead. And then when they're down, they'll throw incessantly. Makes Hartman pretty good to stack. He's not mobile. He certainly doesn't have a ceiling on the ground, but he's not taking like as many sacks as some of the other players like Tanner Morgan on the slate. So I think Hartman is a little bit more viable in tournaments at his price. I'd rather play Slovis. I'd rather play De'Aaron King. I'd rather play Delora. But if you're just stacking this game, he makes some sense. Super easy stacking options. Jacare Roberson is the alpha. I don't think he comes in with as much ownership with Garrett Wilson just below him in price. Behind them, A.T. Perry, 4,900. I think he's a solid pivot off Taj Washington if you're playing the USC stacks. This is another spot I think you could get some leverage by playing like a Hartman to A.T. Perry stack, and it should come in with far less ownership.
Definitely can be a leverage point. I don't think it'll be popular. Where does Christian Beal-Smith fit in to these game plans? And then you've got Christian Turner as well, who's also getting a sizable workload in that backfield.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's because they played Old Dominion in Norfolk State and they just took the foot off the gas, took Beal Smith out. Towards the end of the year, without Kenneth Walker, they did use Christian Beal Smith as a bell cow. I think he has upside for that kind of workload. I just don't know if it's going to happen when they play competitive games. So this will be a really telling game on how they want to use the backs. I'm presuming a timeshare. They've historically used Beal Smith in a timeshare, but that doesn't mean the upside isn't there for him to take on more.
All right, last game on the slate. Then we'll take some questions. Tulsa, 25-point favorites. They wish.
That'll be the day.
That would be the day. Honestly, they should be, given what Ohio State did last week. Just a complete no-show at home. I really don't understand how that happened, but I assume they'll be quite angry today. So we'll get Tulsa out of the way quickly. I mean, Ohio State's defense, they could not stop that running game, but it was an Oregon team that's obviously better than Tulsa. Where does that leave us with a guy like Prince or Brooks or anything from the squad?
I don't want to play anyone in the backfield in a committee with a really low total, even though Ohio State's been pretty giving on the ground. I would rather just play a min price receiver. They're not exactly min price, but they're pretty close. So like Keelan Stokes, Sam Crawford, Juan Carlos Santana. If you're below 4K, I think this is where you want to look.
On the other side, let's get to it. I mean, Stroud, he's been putting up ridiculous numbers through the air. He hasn't done anything on the ground, but he's 10 and 11K. So he is truly at the top. He's got the most stackable batches of receivers, but at what point does salary just become too much of a burden?
It's starting to get that way here. It's tighter pricing than we've had in recent weeks, and these guys are more expensive. Like last week, Garrett Wilson in the 5Ks is bananas. He's pretty shocking even at 6.4K. I think he's probably the best price-adjusted receiver on the entire slate. Still, stacking him with Stroud is getting increasingly difficult because of price. And those games were really competitive. If Ohio State gets up in this game and they lean more on the running attack, maybe you see less volume for these guys. With that said, Garrett Wilson's still probably the best price-adjusted receiver. Chris Olave is the direct pivot, and he's going to give you a lot of leverage off a much higher-owned Wilson. Stroud, it's just he has to outperform the other studs in that range, which is possible. I would rather play like Bryce Young, I think, though.
What I don't even actually know the answer to this. Is Master Teague hurt, or was he just cut out of the running back rotation last week?
I don't believe he's injured. He's just really bad, man. And Ryan Day has committed to him time and time again. Like if you look, I'll tell you the yards per carry in just a second between him and Trey Sermon last year. And you'll just it's mind blowing that they ever gave this guy a carry. Like it's
Maybe this is Travion Henderson day.
I think it's going to become a 2-man backfield eventually. Last year, yards per carry, Master Teague 4.9, Trey Sermon 7.5. Like, what in the world are they doing giving Master Teague carries? And Crowley's even worse. Luckily, they've been phased out of the backfield a little bit. It should firmly be Mine Williams and Henderson here. I'm going to take shots on Henderson in tournaments. The same thesis as Eric Gray and Kennedy Brooks and Will Shipley and all these backs and timeshares with upside. So I will have some options from this backfield, probably mostly Henderson because he's cheaper.
Yeah, pretty appealing. Oh my God, JD, Eddie, you like UConn? I don't know if I can do it, my friend. I don't care if they're getting 34.5. They're that bad. I don't think they're going to score today. All right, let's take some questions. I'm sorry, I bet Army, so I had to. Letty Brown and Travel or Slovis and Taj?
Letty Brown and Travel. I don't understand so you're not, that has to be a super flex question. Slovis. Right? That has to be a super flex question.
Yeah, I don't really understand that. Yeah, you always want to get the quarterback.
Yeah,
obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Favorite DK wide receiver, 4,600 or below?
Naylor.
Yeah, Naylor. That is the answer. The target share is just so condensed there.
It's bananas.
GQ, Slovis or your boy from Coastal Carolina, Grayson McCall?
Slovis. They're not the same price. It's a tough question.
All right. We got, who do you think will be the chalk running backs? This is interesting because there's so many backs garnering interest. Do you think that will maybe flatten ownership a little bit?
Cameron Harris, most owned Potts too.
De'Ara King or Penix? I think that's got to be De'Ara King.
Yeah, they're not the same price.
Here's a good question. I want to talk quickly, if you can, just your 30-second pitch on a couple of the FanDuel games. You got Mississippi State and Memphis over there.
Oh, that game's fun. As far as prices on that slate, I think that one's not quite as efficient. Will Rogers not really mobile, And on the other side, Seth Hennigan, not really mobile. They're pretty expensive too. Like if you go up 300 more, you get Brennan Armstrong, and there's some other cheaper plays. You can stack the receivers for either team pretty easily. Like Mekhi Polk is the alpha for Mississippi State. I would look to him. He's very cheap. And it's tough to say alpha because they rotate so much. Calvin Austin being the most expensive receiver on the slate for Memphis, I think you probably just look to like a Sean Dykes, or you play a different receiver altogether. I would ignore the South Carolina-Georgia game entirely. You don't know who's playing quarterback most of the time for Georgia. They run 5 backs in the backfield. Auburn, Penn State. Auburn's tough to get to. They haven't played anybody difficult this year. Bo Nix has historically been really bad. And you have Javarius Johnson coming off an injury. I don't know how much he plays. Tanks Bigsby has been in a timeshare, but his price is really cheap. If you think Auburn gets the job done, I think Bigsby's a pretty good price adjusted play. On Penn State, Clifford's been really efficient. He is an alpha in Dotson. Parker Washington's been the wide receiver too, but he's actually running less routes than Keandre Lambert-Smith. Noah Cain did separate himself in the backfield, so I think he's a middling option. I'm probably not going to play a lot of that game overall. Virginia, North Carolina is super juicy. Brennan Armstrong is just playing a ton, and he's very mobile. He's currently completing 72% of his passes, 11.1 yards per attempt, and he's easy to stack. You have former quarterback Keaton Thompson playing like a Wan'Dale Robinson role almost, like in the slot, catching a lot of passes. He has a team leading 13 targets, and he's also carrying the ball on the ground. Extremely cheap. I have Keaton Thompson in my cash lineup on FanDuel. On the other side, Ty Chandler is really cheap. He should see a pretty good workload. And Josh Downs has taken over that alpha receiver role. Tulane Ole Miss, like play Matt Corral anytime you can. He's extremely mobile, very efficient passer. He's probably the favorite to win the Heisman right now, or close to it with Bryce Young. Stacking options at every price range. Drummond, Mingo's egregiously priced. Braylon Sanders egregiously priced, and the most efficient offense. So I hope that's a pretty good synopsis of FanDuel.
Yeah, I think you got it covered. There are some fun games over there, no doubt. Any word on Omar Manning?
I haven't looked at Nebraska's receivers because I just don't care.
That's fair. I don't think it's super relevant. I hope they get blown up. Maybe, again, we just don't know with that. Washington State QB with Delora or Slovis on the other side?
I think Slovis is your cash play. Like he's going to project higher. But in tournaments, I like Delora.
Jones and Mechie or Harris and Wilson in a GPP?
Who's Jones? Use first names.
Yeah, use first names because I was just hoping you would know and you'd say one of them and then I would nod because I'm not sure.
Especially the generic names like Jones, Smith, like you got to use first names.
Best cheap running back on FanDuel. Anyone for a pay down option potentially?
They're a little tougher over there. I think Henderson's really cheap there.
Yes, Henderson. If it's
Trevion Henderson.
Yes, Trevion. Yeah, I know.
Say use first names and then I'm not using first names. My bad, guys.
What do you think about the volume for King Doru today? Do you think he can get upwards of 20 touches?
Probably not. I think he's probably in the 12 to 15 range, splitting the time almost 50-50 with Dylan Downing.
Thoughts on Prince for Tulsa? I believe you said that it's just a little thin given their implied total.
Yeah, he'll be in a 50-50 timeshare too with Shamari Brooks.
For the Buckeyes, you got Olave or Smith and Najigba on FanDuel?
I would play Olave if you have the salary.
Is Jakari about to go nuclear? Probably. Wake Forest, I think, is a team that's really going to put up some points today, so I don't mind that. Corbin for Florida State, yeah, but he's going to be, I assume, sharing that backfield a little bit.
Yep, exactly.
Manning was warming up. Prince is an option. Yeah, I don't think. Jessica Raza, come on now, that's an easy one.
Wait, what was it?
Or is it? On that note, we'll let you guys think about that. I think we've done a pretty good job here. We did 12 games up, 12 games down, plus some FanDuel, and certainly plus some PrizePicks. Again, make sure you go over there. If you're betting these games, no better time to get into our Slack. We'll be talking betting all day there. I have my article posted. You can hit us up on Twitter. Handles are right below. And also, last thing, go to the Awesemo Odds channel where me and Matt are pumping out a ton of content on the betting side of things. So good luck today. Enjoy these games. We will all be back tomorrow to talk some NFL. Same time, same place. Until then, guys, have a good one. Talk to you soon.